All right, so we are starting our unit on Romeo and Juliet. This PowerPoint is just going to tell you about the characters in Romeo and Juliet, so you can refer back to this to help you when you're watching the two different film versions of the play. So here's our cast of characters. So the characters in Romeo and Juliet fall into three categories. They're either Montagues or Capulets or other characters. Montagues and Capulets are the two families that hate each other. Romeo is a Montague, Juliet's a Capulet. They hate each other. Therefore, when Romeo and Juliet fall in love, it's a problem. And then other characters are characters that are not part of either side. So we're going to start with the Montagues, and we're going to watch two different versions of the film of Romeo and Juliet. So I gave you like the actor that played that character in each film. Montague is the father. He is the father of Romeo, and his enemy is Capulet. There are the two men who play Montague in the two different films. Lady Montague is Romeo's mother and Montague's wife. So they'll call Montague, that's the dad, Lady Montague, that's the mom. Romeo Montague is a 16-year-old. He is the protagonist. He is the son of Montague and Lady Montague. His characteristics, he's handsome, he's sensitive, he's intelligent. He's not interested in violence. He's very interested in love. At first, he's like madly in love with this woman or this girl named Rosaline. And then he very quickly falls madly in love with Juliet. So he is a teenager. He's a romantic, hence the name Romeo. He really is very susceptible to the power of love. Mercutio is Romeo's best friend. He is a kinsman to the prince, and the prince is kind of like the leader of this town. And he is a close friend of Romeo. He loves wordplay. He can be hot-headed. He just has a very different view than Romeo on love. He thinks that love is just based on like sexual appetite. It's not based on all these romantic ideas that Romeo has about love and like true love and finding your one true love. Mercutio is very cynical about love. Those are the two people that play Mercutio. Mercutio, it is important to note, is Romeo's friend, but he is not a Montague. So he does not, he's not part of the family. He is just Romeo's friend. Benvolio is Romeo's cousin. He is part of the Montague family, and he really tries a lot of his role throughout the play is to try to diffuse violence. You can see like the word benefit, benevolent, which means kind. So Benvolio is there, but he's always there with Romeo, but he's often trying to like make the situation less tense and violent. Balthazar is a servant. He is Romeo's servant. He's important because he is the one that brings the news to Romeo that Juliet's dead at the end, but she's actually faking her death. So he plays an important role as a messenger. Balthazar. Okay, now you got Capulet. So the Montagues and the Capulets have a very violent history. They go against each other. Capulet is the father or the patriarch of the Capulet family. He's the father of Juliet. He is an enemy for unexplained reasons of Montague. He truly loves his daughter, but he doesn't really know her well, and she lies to him a lot, and he does not realize that. And he is big on respect. If he thinks that you're being disrespectful to him, he becomes very enraged. He is very hot-headed, has a quick temper, and this often contributes to all the violence that happens between the Montagues and the Capulets in Verona, where this whole play takes place. Verona is in Italy. Lady Capulet, she is Juliet's mother, Capulet's wife. She married very young herself, so she's very interested in getting Juliet married. And there are two images of her. Juliet, she is only 13 years old. People are always very surprised that she is 13 and her parents really want her to get married in the play. And she does actually get secretly married to Romeo. She is the daughter of Capulet and Lady Capulet. She's the only child. She's from an aristocratic family, meaning she comes from a lot of wealth, money, power, fame. And she has little freedom compared to Romeo. So throughout the play, Romeo and Juliet will secretly try to meet up, and a lot of that has to be orchestrated by Romeo or through Juliet's nurse, which we'll read about in the next slide. But Juliet, because she's young and a woman at this time, she really doesn't have a lot of freedom, and she spends a lot of time in her quarters, in her house. The nurse. The nurse has taken care of Juliet since she was very, very little. She is Juliet's confidant, so we find out a lot about what Juliet's thinking because of how she talks to the nurse. The nurse is often the one that goes between Romeo and Juliet and communicates messages. She provides a lot of comic relief. She's very funny. And she also is a contrast with Juliet. So Mercutio is a contrast with Romeo, and the nurse is a contrast with Juliet because her view of love is earthy and sexual, whereas Juliet's very idealistic. She doesn't have a lot of experience with love, so her view on love is not as cynical or sexual as the nurse. Tybalt. Tybalt is Juliet's cousin. He is vain. He's fashionable. He is very full of hatred for the Montagues. He gets very easily offended, and he's extremely aggressive. So the Capulets and the Montagues have been fighting for years. They live in the same town, and you can see how there are aspects and people on both sides of the Montagues and the Capulets that cause them to continue to fight over and over again. Some servants that the Capulets have are Samson, Gregory, and Peter. Prince Aeschylus. So now we're into characters that are not on either side. Prince Aeschylus is not a Montague and he's not a Capulet, but he is the Prince of Verona, Italy, where this whole thing takes place. And he's very concerned with having peace. And the Montagues and the Capulets constantly threaten the peace that the prince wants. He has kinsmen, and they are Paris and Mercutio. And remember, Mercutio is Romeo's best friend. Paris, he is not on either side, but he's a suitor to Juliet, and Juliet's father would like Juliet to marry Paris. But Juliet wants to marry Romeo. Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence is a friend to both Romeo and Juliet. Friar Lawrence is a clergyman, so he works in a church. He wants to bring Romeo and Juliet together because he thinks it's going to promote peace between the two families. He thinks, if these two families, if their children get married, it might make them become more friendly and nice to each other. Because of this, he secretly marries Romeo and Juliet. And he also is very skilled and knows a lot about mystical potions. So he will make a potion that will make Juliet look like she's dead at the end when she's trying to get out of marrying Paris. The chorus. The chorus kind of just is this feature of Shakespearean plays that function as like a narrator, but they'll call them the chorus. And the apothecary. Apothecary is another word for like a pharmacist or pharmacy. And he's the one that sells Romeo poison that Romeo takes because Romeo thinks Juliet's dead. And so he takes poison and kills himself, and he gets it from the apothecary. Now, I talked a little bit about the plot, but I want you to watch the next video about the plot of Romeo and Juliet, because we're not going to have time to read the whole play or see the whole film. But if you can get the plot down, then you'll be able to know what these different people are doing in the play and come up with the lesson or message of the play.